Okay. All right. Welcome to the Resilience Movement podcast. I'm your host, Donna Moulds, and I have a beautiful guest with me today, Sheri Lux. Now, before we do dive in, I just want to share with you it's a gentle reminder that listeners, today's conversation includes discussions on grief, loss, trauma, and the impact of sudden life-changing events. So if these topics feel tender for you right now, please take care of yourself. You're welcome to pause, come back later, or skip this episode entirely. Your well-being always comes first. So on our episode today, I'm joined by Sheri Lux. So Sheri is a speaker, author, creative, entrepreneur, and advocate whose work sits at the intersection of grief, resilience, leadership, and healing. So following the sudden loss of her husband, Sheri's life changed forever. And from that place of profound grief, she made the courageous decision to keep choosing life. So, through her lived experience, her creative work, and her advocacy with first responder communities, Sheri speaks honestly about what it means to rebuild after loss, to sit with pain without being defined by it, and to find meaning on the other side of the storm. This conversation is not about fixing grief or rushing healing. It's about presence, courage, creativity, and learning how resilience is built one day at a time. So Sheri, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Donna. It's an honor to be here.
Uh, I just I was just sharing with you before we went on the call that I am listening to your book, which I'm just I couldn't stop listening and resonating and almost visualizing as you're talking about driving to the ice cream shop or spending time with your mum and dad and just the way you narrate it is so beautiful. So we'll share at the end of this where people can find your book, but I have some questions for you that I'd love to ask so that you can share with our listeners who really appreciate hearing from people who have lived experience. So for listeners meeting you for the first time, how do you describe the work you do now and how it grew from your own lived experience?
Well, uh, the work I do now is I like to talk about some of the shadow emotions that many of us go through at different seasons of our life, because I truly believe that there is strength in vulnerability. And when we can talk about some of those uncomfortable topics that we tend to shy away from or we tend to avoid because they're uncomfortable, I really truly believe that is where the majority of our growth as human beings can be found. So I've gone through some pretty traumatic circumstances, and I've really taken time over the years to cocoon and to give myself what I needed. And I never rushed through it. And I found different, I found my healing through so many different modalities. And writing just happened to be one of them. And that was kind of how my book came about. It actually came about as a journal. I was really journaling, just getting my scattered thoughts onto paper. And one thing led to another over the years with it. But really, I'm just a big advocate for talking about mental health, shining a light on some of those shadows that we tend to shy away from, and realizing that when we share our stories, we can be a light for other people. And I think sometimes we need to borrow a light from others. I know I certainly have had to in my
Yeah.
years of grief. And then sometimes we can shine a light for others. And to be honest, both stages of those have been healing for me in different ways. And I'm just kind of at that stage now where I've regained some of my strength over the last few years. I've made some big bold moves, and yeah, it's kind of like a next phase of my healing journey for me to be able to give back like this and speak.
Yeah, fantastic. And people get so much value from hearing that they are not alone in their journey. So when they can hear from someone else who has that lived experience, that can sometimes take some of the loneliness away. Not all, but some. So you've spoken about how choosing to live after immense loss becomes an act of courage. What did choosing to live actually look like for you in the early days?
Well, I actually made that choice. So I was on a bit of a journey with my husband. So he was a police officer, an RCMP officer here in Canada, and he had been diagnosed with PTSD. And so he was on his own healing journey, which, actually it turned our house quite chaotic and upside down for a few years. He did eventually lose his battle and took his life, but it was even during those few years before I actually became a widow, where I started to make small changes where I was choosing me. Um, and it was, something simple, like I would say no if I didn't want to do something. I stopped giving all of my emotion and all of my attention into things that were just consistently draining me. I started doing small things where I put myself first. I started
Mm.
painting. I started making candles, and they started as hobbies and crafts, and I mean eventually I branded them into a business. But really in the beginning it was just time where I was just giving it to myself. It was my quiet space where I could lock myself in the bathtub surrounded by candles. I could lock myself in the basement and start painting and start creating something out of the chaos that was going on in my home. When he passed away, that was a whole different ordeal to overcome because we had two kids. And so I had to be the solo parent to both kids, navigating their grief journey while also navigating mine. And I will say, out of that, that was when I really learned the importance of meeting my needs first, because I realized how strong I had to be for them. And
Mm.
even if I was having a good day, if they weren't, it could easily pull me down. So I really started to see the value in really putting myself first, and just those little things where I could just replenish my energy and just bring myself back to myself through meditation and listening to my intuition, and the little subtle clues that my body was telling me about what I needed, and following that. And I will say, through that whole journey, I really did learn that we are a lot stronger than we think we are, even in our weakest moments when we're crumbled and we're on the floor. And, I remember my girlfriend saying to me, just because you're on the floor doesn't mean you belong there. I'll sit there with you for a bit, but eventually we're going to get up. And, just giving yourself space to not be okay is so
Yeah.
empowering when you're in the middle of it.
Yeah, and when you just said then, being on the floor and being okay with, not being okay and staying there, I think that's a really important thing. Like we can be there, just don't stay there for too long,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you'll go there again, but just don't
Yeah.
stay there for too long. So I really like,
Yeah.
yeah, that you say that. And so after the loss of your husband, what parts of your identity fell away and what surprised you about who began to emerge? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I feel like I went through a complete identity shift. So when he had passed away, originally for the first decade of our marriage, I was a stay-at-home mom. He
Mhm.
had a very demanding schedule as a police officer, and I love those years. And I look back and they were such charming years and such a simple time in our life. And I truly did take it for granted, thinking that that was always going to be our life in a sense. Um, and then as the kids got older, I went on to become a teacher. And so when he had passed away, I was an active middle grade teacher. Um, and after he had passed away, I don't know how to explain it. It's like I didn't recognize myself anymore. I went through this process of I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. And looking back, and it was such an awful experience to go through, but looking back, I see it as almost a shedding of my old self, because I feel like a completely different person now, living
Mm.
the life I'm living. So I never went back to teaching. I cocooned hard. I put my kids first. I started my company. Originally I was selling my candles and my artwork on the side while I was teaching, and after he passed away, I completely made that my priority. It allowed me to
Yeah.
be home with the kids. I was able to find healing in my business, in a sense. I started speaking more candidly with everybody, everybody around me. And I almost became that heavy person, in a sense. And it probably made some people uncomfortable, because I started speaking about things that maybe other people weren't comfortable speaking about. But how it was so interesting how different people fell away and then different people came into my life. And it was just kind of, as that started to happen more and more, I started to just trust who I was becoming, because I would start walking down this path, and it was hard. It's hard to have people clear out of your life,
Mm.
but what I have learned over the years is it does make space for new people, new situations, new circumstances. I eventually, about 5 years after he passed away, completely packed up my life and moved to a new province, to a bigger city, with my youngest, who was still in school. My oldest was in university at that point. But I just literally hit reset on my life about, I think it's been about 4 years now that I've been here in Calgary. And,
Mm.
it's been the best thing I did. I feel like me again. I feel comfortable in my skin again. I'm, I'm just a new, refreshed version of who I used to be. And honestly, going through everything I've been through, I feel like so much stronger than I ever have before. And I've been through quite a bit. And I'm just, I guess if there's anything I can share with people, is just, no matter how down and out things may be, whatever it may be, there is always hope,
Yeah.
and we are stronger than we think.
And that is so true. That is always so true, is that we are stronger than we think. And you were talking about your circle changing. Isn't it interesting how sometimes our circle becomes very, very small, and when it expands, it expands differently.
Oh, it was very lonely. My circle became so small that I almost became borderline like a hermit for a while. I didn't feel like I connected with anybody. It was almost that process of, my old circle was leaving, but my new one hadn't come in.
Yeah.
And when you're in that phase, it's lonely. But if you're willing to lean into it, it's there's a lot of power and strength really to be found in that space. If
Mm.
you can find yourself, really, when you only have yourself, it's you get pretty solid with who you are. You get pretty comfortable in your own skin and on your 2 feet.
You tend to
And
go
then anyone,
inwards. Yeah.
well, you do. And then anyone that comes in after is almost a bonus, because I got to such a point that I was so comfortable on my own that, yeah, you kind of become, a little fearless in that sense. And you're just kind of living with what resonates with you. You're not worried about people pleasing. You're not worried about fitting in. Like, I was past all of that.
Yeah.
And it's yeah, and it's been great, because I'm since now remarried, which I never ever thought I would do. And I had zero, I never wanted to get remarried again, to be honest. So it's been a very interesting journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lots of surprises along the way.
And sometimes the surprises are a little uncomfortable, but then other times the surprises are, and that, I guess that moment, or those moments where you go, wow, I don't recognize myself anymore. I'm not my old self. I'm this new version of me. And you talked about shedding, and how that allows you. So, kind of like something shedding its skin, and you become this new version. You often, so you've spoken about grief and PTSD and the realities faced by first responder families. What do you feel is still widely misunderstood about how trauma lives on a family?
Well, I think probably the hardest part of our journey was I didn't know I had to be a detective in my own home. So I think there would have been, and this is something I speak quite candidly about. I think there's a lot of value in giving education to families before the trauma sets in, because by the time I realized there was something wrong,
Mm,
um, in terms of my husband's personality had changed, and it happened it happened quite incrementally. And so I didn't realize how bad it was. And there were so many reasons that I had given it. We had just moved to a new city. And so there was a lot of stress with the kids and with him and right. And with me and new jobs and all of these things. And so the personality changes that I saw in him, I didn't attribute to trauma from his job.
mm,
And there were so many other factors. I was going through my own health journey. So when he felt like he was pulling away from me, I thought maybe he wasn't as attracted to me because my body had changed and I had all these surgeries. And, there were so many things. And so I never realized I needed to be a detective in my own home. And when he started drinking, for example, I believed him when he said he had the flu or if he was sleeping late. And I mean, really, it was, he was hungover or drinking excessively. And I had no idea. And I had no idea that alcoholics could be sneaky like they were, right? Like I didn't have that education. So by the time I realized something was very wrong, our house was already flipped upside down. The
yep.
damage was already done so much. I mean, for years at that point. And I look at what the kids and I had gone through, and even him, right? He didn't even know. He
Mm,
didn't even know he was suffering. Eventually, he, was diagnosed and we dealt with that and he went to treatment and all of that. But I mean, it was very confusing, very
mm,
traumatizing for the whole family. I mean, it got to the point where, we didn't even let our kids have friends over because we were so unpredictable. At any given time, a fight could break out, and there was just so much instability in our house. And that was new. We were never like that. And so
mm,
I think that, and the other thing I'll say is when you're in the middle of it like that is not the time to be educated, right? So I'm getting all these pamphlets and I'm getting all these things about PTSD and alcoholism. Well, I mean, at that point, I felt like I could have written the book on it. I'd already lived it, right? And
yeah.
so it's like I needed to know before it got to that point so that we could have maybe done something a little bit sooner or gotten him help a little bit sooner, or something wouldn't have, maybe gone under the radar on my watch like it
Mm,
did, right? Because I do find there is something with that, the police officer culture. They do try to hide that, right? They try to be stoic and they,
yep.
and but at home they let their guard down a bit more. So, I've often wondered if there was something that I would have picked up on earlier had I known what to look for.
Mm,
So I think that education piece beforehand, that's something there's so much value in that. And I think I think they're starting to implement that into quite a few of the forces here, which I'm really, really happy to hear. So
which is
that's
really
probably the one that stands out the most.
Yeah, which is really
Mhm.
great that they're starting to implement something. But sometimes do you get frustrated and go, should have implemented this a long time ago and informed families of potentials to, things to look out for. And I mean, now when we go and have babies, they are talking about postpartum. They are talking about, the depression that can come, and there is a lot more awareness about that. And I think that when you were talking about the culture in the police department, that culture is also in corrections. It's also in a lot of other industries. And it's been there for such a long time that I think that I feel personally that we're moving too slow in educating people about, the risk of PTSD and the impact on families and children and long-term impact. So,
Well, and I feel like within the organizations, because I've been involved in a few here within Canada, and I feel like every organization is unique and a lot of it is top down. So a lot of it depends on who's in charge and what they're pushing. And then I think in the meantime, there's people like me who just speak about it candidly because it's our own lived experience. And I do feel like that also kind of gets the word out a bit and it gets the
Mm.
conversation going a bit. Maybe with some of the organizations that are a little bit more hesitant because nobody wants to really admit that maybe they could be doing more or they
Mm.
should be doing more. I think that can sometimes be a bit of a sensitive topic where it's not about blaming,
Yeah.
and I've been so candid with that. This isn't about blaming. I don't blame anyone for what happened to my husband. I don't blame I there's no blame there. For me moving forward, it's just helping other people. If our story can be used as a cautionary tale to help other people moving forward, then I guess it gives some purpose. We'll never get him back in that sense, but at least it gives some purpose to what we went through if I know that we're helping other people.
Yeah, I think that's really important. So you often say people aren't broken. The pain and the growth can act as a compass. How can someone begin to trust the idea when they feel completely undone?
Oh, yeah. Um, for me, when I was the most unraveled was probably when I cocooned the most. Um, and I just learned to find elements and modalities that would help me process the unknown. And I
Mhm.
say that in a sense because I didn't even know at the time. I'm not thinking about what I need to process. I'm just trying to survive.
Yeah.
And I'm not thinking about actively trying to do anything other than just get through the day and hope that tomorrow is just 1% better than today. And I think if you can give yourself that space to do that, there's something that happens when you are able to turn inward and just pay attention to some of those emotions that come up. And that's why I was such a fan of journaling.
Mhm.
Things were so heavy and so tangled, and I wouldn't journal for any other purpose than just to get it out of my brain. And it wouldn't even be something that I would necessarily keep or hang on to or anything like that. I would sometimes just delete it, but I just needed to offload it. And so just finding, and then there were sometimes I needed to just completely shut my brain off, and that's when I would go to painting.
Mm.
And that's where I truly think that there's healing to be found in the arts. I know, after my husband had passed away, one of his colleagues, he had called me up about a year later, and he had said that he hadn't played his guitar in 15 years. And
Wow.
after the passing of my husband, he picked up his guitar and he just kind of retaught himself how to play again. And he actually started writing songs. And he would send me these songs, and it was his way of channeling his grief. And at the time, I don't think he knew that's what he was doing.
Mm.
It was something that was shutting his brain off. It was something that, he probably felt a little bit lighter. It was a little bit cathartic for him. There was a purging process that went on. And then all of a sudden he polished it and he had something that he wanted to share. So I think we all have that in us, that ability to just kind of find that thing, whatever it
Mm.
is, whether it's building something, working with your hands, or something artistic where there's that outlet,
Mm.
sports, whatever it is, right? If there's that outlet to kind of, I don't know, just get you through that day, that moment, because sometimes those moments get really, really tough.
Yeah, I have a very close friend, and he had told me early on about his PTSD, and he goes for a ride on his motorbike,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
that helps him, and he knows. So it's really, yeah, about finding what works for you, and whether it's art, music. I mean, for me, I like just walking out in nature. That really
Yeah.
just soothes my soul. So. Um, and so you were talking about creativity and how that became a part of your healing journey. And you talked about the role played in how you disconnected from what was happening and you were able to be creative. What would you say to people who haven't really thought about having something like painting or like your candles? How would they get to where they find something that would maybe make the shift for them to be able to release?
You know, I don't know if I heard this somewhere, I read it somewhere, but it's always stuck with me. And it's whatever you like doing as a kid, go back to that. And
Oh,
whatever, yeah. And it's interesting because kind of a side story, I got really into in my healing journey, really into Reiki and acupuncture and meditation, and kind of started delving into that side of things. And I really got into crystals. Like, I got crystals all over my home and in my office, and I love my crystals. But when I was a kid, I used to love rocks. I remember my mom having garage sales, and I would like put little rocks in bags and try and sell them. And it was so funny when I heard that, when someone I heard, I'm sure it was someone who said that go back to what you enjoyed as a kid, because I was, oh my gosh, I used to love playing with, did not even realizing, putting the correlation that later I would be into crystals and putting crystals in my paintings and in my candles. I incorporated into so many things I do now. But even as a kid, I enjoyed painting. And whatever it was that you enjoyed as a kid, if it was sports, if it was running, if it was whatever it was,
yeah.
I would say that would be your first clue, is just start
Mm.
exploring that and just see if you kind of get a breadcrumb path that leads you onto something that you might enjoy, or something that maybe just shuts your brain off, or you just feel a little bit lighter or better after you've started it.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Your business carries deep meaning and legacy. How important was it for you that your work held intention, not just output?
Well, everything in my company is intentional, down to the name. My kids never really knew their grandmothers. Both of their grandmothers passed away from cancer when my
Mhm.
kids were young. My mom, my son never even met. And so even the name of my company is named after their two grandmothers. And so everything I have put into this company has been with intention. And that is the whole message behind my company. And honestly, part of that is just because of how it started.
Yeah.
My company started just from me being an absolute mess and living in my bathtub to hide from my life. And I was just lighting so many candles all the time because I found them so soothing that I just taught myself how to make them. I just started ordering product and teaching myself how to make them. And it literally just started as a hobby because I'm creative, I guess, in a sense. Being a teacher and whatnot, and so it was quite natural for me just to teach myself a new hobby. But even down to how my company started, it healed me. My company is truly what healed me. And it's been part of my healing journey. And so I'm so adamant with my candles that they are lit with intention, because that is the premise behind everything.
And so say the name of your business.
It's Karis Lane candles.
And I didn't want to say it. I wanted you to say it first because I wanted it, the name to be perfectly said, and I didn't want to do
Yeah.
it any injustice. And in the bottom of the description in this podcast, I'll have details for Sheri and her business so everyone can take a look at that. Um, and so let's move into meaning and leadership and service, a discussion. So you've said the more dramatic the storm, the more intentional the reset can be. How did you consciously begin resetting your life when nothing went to plan?
It kind of goes back to when I started to go inward again. And I started to listen to the little hints I would get. Um, I would hear a song on the radio, and I would hear, a same song over and over. And I all of a sudden realized maybe there's a message in there for me. I just started to really go inside, really listen to my intuition, really listen to the messages of the universe. I think when you get to a place where everything you've known has unraveled. Life as I knew it had unraveled. My marriage was over. I didn't really know who I was. People in my life were falling away. I was different. We
Mm.
didn't connect on the same level. So I think when your life completely unravels, it's easier to listen to those small little hints along the way. And then I just started acting on them. One little motion forward. And what I found so fascinating over the years was how much the universe loves movement. The universe loves action, even if it's small action, even if you don't understand it fully. It loves to meet you where you are. And when you make that small move, it's like you're showing the universe you're ready. You're ready for the next phase. You're ready for the next step. And
Mm.
I at the time I wasn't intentionally doing that. But looking back, and I can say that I truly do trust that even moving forward, now that my life is, I guess, quote unquote, put back together, and I'm living a life that I do recognize and I am enjoying again. But I'm very cognizant of that. What is my next step? And going inward. And even if I
Mm.
don't quite understand why, I'm just trusting that process. Hasn't
Yeah.
failed me yet.
Trusting. Yeah, I really believe in that. But I like what you said about just making small motions, just small steps. So, um, your book, Finding My Fire, invites readers to walk alongside you rather than learn from a distance. What was your intention in writing it in that way?
Well, that book started, just a little bit of a backstory behind that. My husband had passed away. I knew I wanted, the city we were living in, we were only living in that city because his work had placed us in that city. And so after he had passed away, I really didn't want to be there anymore for various reasons. I didn't feel connected, and I just wanted a fresh start. And I was thinking about moving my children at that point, and then COVID hit. And so we all had to stay put. And then we all know how that story went. So I didn't end up moving for probably, 3 years after when I actually wanted to.
Mhm.
And so it was during COVID where we're all just kind of locked at home. And I'm quite frankly wanting to crawl out of my skin for various reasons. I'm new widow, grieving my kids, like the whole thing. Um, and I just started writing, and it just kind of started where I just started writing. It made me, honestly, I think I started writing as a way to feel closer to my mom. When I started writing about my childhood, I was really missing my mom. I was missing my husband, and I wished my mom was there to help me through all that. And I was really missing her. She died when I was in my mid 20s, and so there's so many pockets in my life where I missed her, but that was one where I really missed her. And so I started writing almost just to feel more connected to her, and I just started writing about my childhood and writing about how her and dad had met, and some of my earlier memories. And honestly, that was truly how the book started. And all of a sudden I started kind of rereading it, and I thought, oh my gosh, like if I just fill in a few gaps here, I almost have a bit of a memoir. And then I kind of actively decided to turn it into that. But it really just started as a way for me to reconnect with my mom, who I was missing at the
Mm.
time quite a bit.
Mm. That's and I'm very grateful. My mum is still here, but I had a very close relationship with my grandmother, and connecting with her, I write about that as well. So I hear what you're
Yeah.
saying. As an ambassador working closely with first responder communities, how has your grief shaped the way you lead and advocate in service of others?
I think, having that life experience, that lived wisdom, and that relatability. Um, because I've walked that path, right? And so when it comes to spouses that are struggling with their husband's PTSD, and it can show up in various forms, I just I've been very honest in terms of things that my family has gone through and where I've struggled with it. I mean, I had to overcome my own codependency because I was internalizing everything my husband was doing. And so I speak about that as well.
Mm.
And just how, and I didn't realize that being married to an alcoholic, that I was actually part of the problem for a while and I didn't even realize it because I had slipped into codependent behaviors, which basically means I was enabling and I was a people pleaser and things like that. And so I had to actively overcome that as well. And that was also, when I started setting my boundaries and really kind of finding my voice and getting comfortable in my own skin and my own 2 feet again and things like that. And so I speak about that. And I do think a lot of the families can relate to that because the first responder lifestyle very much takes over your home, right? They work
Mm.
shift work. And for us, we were actually moving around the province and the country for they would post us in different places, so it's a national police force, so very much takes over your family. And so just having that relatability and talking honestly about the good and the bad and the confusing stuff, and if my experience can help someone kind of maybe see things a little differently, then I don't mind sharing. I think truly that's what makes the world go round.
Yeah, I agree. And when you talk about setting boundaries, for the listeners who, that could be very, very new for them. And setting boundaries around, it could be around family, it could be around relationship. Where do you start when you go? Because someone doesn't go, I got to set boundaries. Here's this boundary and this boundary and this boundary. It kind of evolves, doesn't it? Share with us a
Yeah.
little bit about that. How did that get started?
Well, it's terrifying. Setting boundaries is terrifying. Probably the hardest thing I've ever done, but the most impactful in terms of changing the trajectory of my life and kind of returning back to myself. Because a lot of times you don't realize that um, your boundaries have been compromised, right? And
Mm,
you don't realize you're doing that. You're just kind of going with the flow. You're easygoing. You're a people pleaser. You don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to upset someone. And I mean, this carries through to everyone, family members, spouses. Um, so for me, um, I learned, I guess, kind of early on in a sense that I had to start handling my boundaries more appropriately because when my husband he had gone away for treatment for
mhm.
his drinking, and when he came back he had actually said to me, Sheri, you have a problem too. And I was quite offended by that, obviously. But I was like, I'm the glue in this house. What do you mean? But nonetheless, he was referring to my codependency. So when he was in treatment, he was learning about the spouses and their roles and what they play. And so I had gone away for 1 week of my codependent treatment. And that was when I learned the importance of boundaries. So I kind of had a cheat sheet in a sense because
Mm,
I dove in for a full week of, it was basically group therapy for a week. But, for me, setting the boundaries was just speaking from fact instead of emotion.
mm,
Even something as simple as that. And and an example of this would be if my husband was drinking and couldn't make it to hockey, my son's hockey game or something. The old me would have made excuses. I would have said, oh, dad has to work. Dad's tired. We would have went to the rink and I was, oh, he's working. Or I would have made up anything I could to just save face. And the new me would actually say to my kids, you know what, dad's making poor choices again. We hope he turns it around. We hope he, can show up. But if not, it's okay. Mom's here and mom's going to watch and we can tell dad all about it later. And so something as simple as just sticking to the facts and not
mm.
getting caught up in that emotion because typically my emotion was what was running me before. I would get upset. Oh, what do you mean you're not coming? And we'd fight and all of this stuff. And then I would go out and I would save face and thinking I was protecting the family and our privacy and things. And it just got to a point where I just started holding people accountable. If
Mm.
they said something rude, I would pause and say, what did you mean by that?
Mm,
If they weren't showing up in their full capacity, I would just say, well, I guess that's not where you are today, and that's okay. We'll move on. And so it was just really almost detaching from that emotion
yeah.
and just sticking to the facts. And that has been so powerful in so many of my relationships moving forward, because I realized how much my emotion was actually running me. And that's not a powerful place when you have your
No,
emotion running you.
no. It's a place that sometimes is filled with regret.
hmm hmm
Um, so looking back, what has grief taught you about resilience that you couldn't have learned any other way?
Oh, that is probably been the biggest teacher for how strong people really are. I've lost a lot of people in my life, a lot of people that were so close to me. I've lost my mom, all of like my aunts, all to the same disease, the same, it was ovarian and breast cancer. I carried the gene. So I had to go through 9 surgeries to preventatively, I had the same fate as them, and they all passed away in their 40s, and like they were young. So, you know, and they were all people I was so close to. So my mom was, I was so close to her. And then her sisters stepped in after she passed, and I was close to them. And then they, one by one passed away. And then my husband passed away. And I mean, it's been just kind of a sad story in that sense. But I look at my life, and sometimes I'm even surprised I can be so happy with so many people missing. And I think it truly does, it has taught me that we are so much stronger than we
Mm,
think we are. And I mean, and just us on our own, that part, just turning inward and doing and leaning into those shadow emotions and doing that hard work, like what is waiting on the other side of that is, it's nothing short of incredible. I'm so fearless right now. There's very few things that scare me anymore, because I just, the resiliency has just taught me that life is meant to be lived. It's just, if you can kind of give yourself that permission to cocoon and do that work in the cocoon, there's so much life to live on the other side of it. And the grief is still there. Sadness is still there. We still miss dad on the holidays. We still talk about everybody daily. Like there's nothing off topics, or
mm.
we try to include all those memories in our daily life and on our holidays and things like that. So they're never far. But we're okay. And I see it in my kids, and they're okay. And that's just kind of been a lesson for me in a sense of life. Like we're here to live.
I like the fact that you said you're so fearless now, and not much scares you. But if resilience is a muscle, something we have to work consistently, what are a couple of the daily practices that keep you strong now?
I'm a big meditator, so I meditate daily. I have my routine in the morning. I get up every morning at 4:30. People think I'm crazy, but the reason I do that is because I love spending time alone. And I know that if I get up at 4:30, I'm going to have a solid 2 hours before anyone in the house is awake. And to me, that is my golden hour. That's where I journal. Anything that's going to come to me intuitively comes to me very strongly in during those hours. Um, so that's something, even if I'm on holiday, that's just something that's almost just naturally ingrained in me. I love to walk. I love to do things that ground me. Um, even right now I have my candle going beside me, because the crackle of the wooden wick, right? Like I have like all my little rituals that I just have around me. And it just keeps me here, keeps me present. And when things feel overwhelming, or things feel a little unpredictable, it never gets as far as it ever did in the past, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I've started to recognize those signs. And so I've started to realize, no, Sheri, you need to do a little more meditation. No, you need to go for the walk needs to be extra long today, or you need to call a girlfriend, or you need to connect with someone, or you need to disconnect from everyone and go start an art project. Or I've just really learned to follow those cues and just listen to what I need, and to see, and I'm always monitoring where I'm at. So I'm always checking in with
Mm,
myself and
mm.
kind of, doing that dance a little bit of where I need to do more of something and or less.
And I think that's really key, isn't it? It's about finding what is it. You've got to stop and be still long enough to discover what it is that you need. So, Sheri, thank you for your honesty, your courage, and the way you continue to show up for others. For listeners who want to spend more time with Sheri's story, her book, Finding My Fire, is available now and offers a deeply personal reflection on grief, healing, and discovering purpose after loss. You can find Finding My Fire through Sheri's official channels and major book retailers. I got mine because I'm an Audible. I love Audible. So I always thank you for listening to the resilience movement. My listeners, you are amazing, and all around the world. Please take care of yourself until we meet next time. Thank you so much. Sheri, thank you.